Hello and welcome to another Atypical Philosopher video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pearce. It's a frontline update for the 7th of December 2022. Let's get right down to it. What has happened overnight? Well, let's go first of all to actually the missile attacks from yesterday, because a lot of people are still talking about that. So Russia fired more than 70 cruise missiles. First thing to point out is that's fewer missiles than they had done on previous saturation bombings or missile attacks. So what does that tell you? Are they running short? Probably. But even that the cost of those 70 is in the value of somewhere to 400 from 400 to 500 million dollars as according to Forbes. So that's a massive investment, if you like, of Russia as they send that wave, very costly wave to replace. And this war is obviously going to be costing Russia in so many ways so much. Experts examine remnants, says Shashank Joshi of The Economist, of KH-101 cruise missiles found in Kiev, the capital, after an attack on November the 23rd, so this is going back a little while, that knocked out electricity and shut down water systems in large areas of the country. One of the missiles was made this summer, and another was completed after September. So this is the idea that missiles made no earlier than October have been recently used, and that could indicate that they've got dwindling stockpiles. So if you're starting to see the most recently manufactured missiles, then they have used up their stockpiles. That is potentially really revealing and fits in with exactly what I've been saying over the last month. Andrew Perpetua says that there are claims that the Ukrainian drone production will be in full swing by February. So there are lots of claims that Ukraine are ramping up the manufacture of lots of different drones that can go 1,000 kilometers and hold 75-kilogram warheads. They've got other drones like the Shark drone and reconnaissance drones. They're really realizing that drones are incredibly important. And so as much as their military manufacturing capacity can work, they are using it. At which point Ukraine will be able to regularly attack Russian air bases, military bases, rocket installations, trains and electrical substations. In theory, they could hit Moscow. So if Ukraine can make their own, they are not beholden. So there's a claim that's come out today that the US has hobbled HIMARS so that they literally can't fire missiles over a certain range. So even if they were provided with the missiles, the HIMARS would be unable to fire those types of missile. And that really limits Ukraine with what they can do. Well, if they can make their own stuff and send that into Russia, then they can hit Russia where it hurts. Whether that's escalatory is another question, and whether escalation matters when you are being completely, debilitated by an aggressive, oppressive power. It's whatever. Russians have attacked Zaporizhia Oblast with S-300 missiles, so these are the surface-to-air missiles that can be used in the secondary mode. They have destroyed quite a bit of residential area in villages outside of Zaporizhia. So going back to the drone attacks that Ukraine sent, so they sent a drone, it appears, and in fact we've got some kind of confirmation that they were Ukrainian drones, both in the New York Times and the Washington Post. And in fact, New York Times article, there's a Ukrainian official that says they had a special forces unit that was directing the drone. So there could be a special forces unit deep inside Russia. Whether that's like playing with them, whether that's a psyops, claim that's going to play with the minds of the Russians, you don't know. But this is the footage from the fire. Now, there was also a third attack apparently on the Belbek airbase in Sevastopol, but those apparently 2 drones were shot down there. There's pretty good air defense in Crimea compared to in mainland Russia. It seems that mainland Russia have taken to starting wars in neighboring countries, but have forgotten to maybe look at their own air defense systems. So this is the Washington Post. Senior Ukrainian official told the Washington Post that all 3 recent attacks targeting Russian air bases were carried out by Ukrainian drones. So there are 2 air bases, and in Kursk, which is the refinery or the crude oil or kerosene storage units. So that they were carried out by Ukrainian drones. Very successful, very effective, says the source. And then overnight, really interesting development that there are 14 Iranian Shahed 136 drones that have been shot down overnight, and 3 other drones, all An-10, and then 2 others, not sure what they are yet. And these, 14 drones, I don't know if any of them got through. All I know is that 14 were shot down, and that's that. It could be that 100% of these drones were taken out and had absolutely no effect on the Ukrainians. If that is the case, that's really substantial, because it means that Ukraine have adapted to remove the efficacy of these drones, and that will be a really, really big step forward. But I don't know. And talking about Sumy, so Sumy is up here. This is this area to the north. That has come under increasing attack over the border recently, and apparently over 220 projectiles. So there'll be things like, could be grads, could be artillery pieces, of artillery rounds, were fired over into Sumy on December the 6th. So that's yesterday. Russian forces launched 226 projectiles at 7 communities in Sumy Oblast, according to the regional governor there. And just a little bit from inside Russia, last night the movement of passenger trains and freight trains along the Trans-Siberian Railway was suspended in the Krasnoyarsk region. Partisans destroyed 4 signaling devices for centralization and blocking SCB. So that's, again, really useful for the Ukrainians, that there are partisans working within Russia to take out the railway network as much as possible, and that is massively important to the Russians. The railway, they are a railway army and a railway nation. It's such a huge, geographically huge country. They really rely on the railway. So what are the Ukrainian numbers that they've released? 540 personnel liquidated, slight uptick. 6 tanks, 4 APCs, 8 artillery systems. Now that's quite significant, as no report says here. Significant because those are the things that are hammering the front lines day after day. So really, when I look at these stats, that's the first thing I look at to see if there's been a good day for Ukraine. 6 tanks is a slight uptick, and that's great. 4 APCs, yeah, but actually artillery systems is what you want. And the 14 UAVs here, actually that's 17 now, so it's slightly out of date, as they're counting numbers. And then the other one that I think is always significant is the vehicles and fuel tanks. Now, it could be that these are MRAPs and other types of vehicles, yeah. But if they are fuel tanks, the fact that that's ticked up to 21 it could well be incredibly significant as well. So a real uptick in some of those stats that I think shows it's possibly a good day, at least to some degree, was a good day for Ukraine in some of their figures. Okay, let's get to Frontline. So as we go into the northwest, start in the northeast, from the Kupiansk to Svatove-Kreminna line. The first thing to say is actually virtually no movement at all. A few things to note, particularly up near Kupiansk. So let's go there first. So Kupiansk is here, and we've had this area for around Vilshana, Poshetrovnevi, Tevozhanka that has basically been unchanged for a good month, I would say. Now it turns out that Russians are shelling Tavozhanka. Now, I've just arbitrarily moved the Ukrainian line forward there. I have no idea what area Ukraine control here, but if Russia for a couple of days have been shelling Tavozhanka, then the Ukrainians have to be there in some way. Now, Tavozhanka is an interesting place. It's quite long, and it sits around a lake here. So it's, it could be that Ukrainians are only just in this part here and they're being shelled. Quite often you get claims about near places. So we've also heard that Bodanivsky has been shelled by the Russians as well, but it's near there. Well, near there could be right back here, because this is the closest settlement maybe to somewhere back here. So it could be that Ukrainians are still behind the lines that I'd originally thought they were, or they could be in the settlement. And so it's very difficult in these early stages of hearing news about shelling as to exactly where people are. They're also shelling around Liman Pershi as well. So there are attacks around here. Dvorichna has been shelled as well over the last few days. So it's interesting that it's suddenly picked up around here. And we'll have to wait to see exactly what happens in that area. As we come down south. We know that the Russians hit a command post in Kislivka, which is kind of Russian admission that, yes, the Ukrainians definitely do control Kislivka, because there are some people saying, well, I'm not really sure yet. They have advanced, it appears, to the east of Yahidne, towards Novoterasivka, but no news about that particularly from last night or yesterday. And again, no real news about Novoselivska and Kuzmivka, which is one of the main areas that's contested around here. There is some fighting around Ryarodka, which is the first time I've heard that being mentioned now for quite a long time. And I've been wondering exactly what's going on with these places that are actually closer to Svatova. So Svatova is just here. You've got Ryarodka and Kolomychika, and some of these settlements that you don't hear about for a long time, and you wonder, whether there's any fighting going on near there. And then the normal sort of lack of news, I guess, the sort of repelled attacks around Chervonopopivka and Ploschanka. Indeed, as the ISW says, the Institute for the Study of War, the American think tank, yeah, the where are we? Here we go. So it says that the Russian troops are attempting to hold their positions along the Svatove-Kreminna line as they prepare defensive fallback positions in Starobilsk. So it's interesting. So noting that the Russian forces in the area have had adequate time to prepare echeloned defensive lines and have heavily mined the surrounding territory to complicate Ukrainian advances. It's interesting. So Russian and Ukrainian sources reported fighting along the Svatove-Kreminna line near Ryarodka, Ploschanka, Chervonopopivka, Zitlivka, and Bilohorivka, which are further down south of Kreminna. And that's, certainly interesting that you've got the Ukrainian military administration saying that, do you know what, the Russians have had time to build up echelons of defense, so levels of defense behind Svatova. So you got, your primary defense around here, and then you got Starobilsk defenses around there, and I think there are defenses coming down in the middle as well. So this is going to present a big problem for any advances of the Russians, especially since these areas apparently have been heavily mined as well. So yeah, certainly something to watch out for there. So as we come down to the Kreminna area, what do the sources say? NOAA report says north of Kreminna there's a struggle for the P-66, says war blogger War Gonzo. So the Russians admitting that if there's a struggle for the P-66, it means they've probably lost control of parts of P-66 there, which is what we're hearing. As far as we know, the Ukrainians have managed to take control over Chervonopopivka. Clearing is underway. Zitlivka not yet under control, and Russia counterattack ongoing in Bilohorivka. Okay, so just to let you know, well, that is. So Chervonopopivka, the claims are that Ukraine now control Chervonopopivka there. I'm still keeping that somewhat grey to the eastern side of that, but that would be incredibly important, especially since the highway is just there. Of course, that highway is not going to be so useful now that this is all compromised, and the supplies are going to be coming in from behind, certainly to Kreminna and to Svatova up north here. So that's where these roads here are where the supplies are going to be, and it's not going to be moving up and down the P-66 anymore. But however, it will be incredibly important because it's on higher ground here. And if and when, you might say, when the Ukrainians move to the east, then that road will become a useful supply route for them, if only just to get troops up and down quickly on paved roads. And yeah, so there no real news about Zitlivka, and it's interesting that I have Dobrova broadly under Ukrainian control. It's a bit up and down. The different claims here, Andrew Perpetua has Dobrova in Russian control, and no reports has it in the grey zone. So, it's all happening around there. An update for December the 6th, kind of short. First I see, says Andrew Perpetua, many sources saying Russians' main line is set up 2 kilometres south of Kreminna, and that Ukraine has cleared the forested area north of Kreminna. So I've updated the map thusly. So this is this area to the north, he says, um, which is this forested area. So that's fascinating. If Ukraine have actually moved into this forested area and cleared it up, I haven't changed that yet, but that's really something to watch out for. So it means that both north and south, there is Ukrainian presence very close to Kreminna, and of course, when you have presence there, although it's forested area, probably not ideal for artillery. Kreminna is if you're in Kremlin now and you're Russian, you're going to be starting to worry. But there you go. As we move down to Bilohorivka, there's significant attack by Russia on Bilohorivka today. They made a legitimate attempt to break through the defences. From what I understand, it failed. I know the first wave failed completely, but I've heard very little about the second wave. So Bilohorivka is definitely under a lot of pressure at the moment. The Russians obviously see that as quite an important target for them. Okay, let's move on further down south. So as we come down south from Bilohorivka through Boristovi, the other Bilohorivka, not heard anything about Spirny, to be honest. We move on to Bakhmut, and there is intense fighting all around Bakhmut, Yakovlevka, Vuhledar, Bakhmutska, all of these areas, all the ones we've heard for weeks now, Opitny, Klishchivka, and Kherson, all around here. So lots of fighting going on, and there's interesting sort of varied claims. So okay, let's look at some of my normal sources first. So for the third day in a row, Russia pushes towards Klishchivka but is repelled. Additional Ukrainian artillery has been deployed to the front, doing damage to Russians near the choking point east of Ivanhrad. So Ivanhrad is here just by Opitny there. So there's obviously some kind of choking point around there. Not exactly sure what that refers to. Vuhledar and Bakhmutsky are heavily shelled. And Andrew Perpetua said, I've updated the Russian area of control around Bakhmut. This doesn't really represent a change in the situation, more of a clarification. So, and then Rybar doesn't actually say all that much. Starobilsk direction, intense fighting continues in Bakhmut, Opitny, Yakovlevka, and Bilohorivka. LNR, Ukrainian HIMARS struck Starobilsk, so that's miles away. That's back up near the I don't know why Rybar includes Bakhmut in the Starobilsk area, injuring several municipal workers, but really that's all they say there. Now, the Institute for the Study of Wars says a few interesting bits and pieces. So, first of all, from the Ukrainians' point of view, Bakhmut area is currently experiencing the most intense battles on the front line, but that Ukrainian forces are holding their defences and inflicting maximum losses on Russian forces. So, the Ukrainians are saying, we are giving the Russians a real bloody nose. They are taking loads of losses. But then on the flip side, Russian sources claim that Russian troops made marginal gains around Bakhmut on the 5th and 6th. Spokesman for the DNR, Bezosonov, claimed that Wagner forces are advancing in the Bakhmut area, inflicting major losses on Ukrainian forces. And this kind of feeds into, well, it's a meat grinder. Both sides are really losing a lot of troops. The Russian MOD claimed that Russian forces repelled Ukrainian attacks near Kupiansk on December the 6th, resulting in heavy Ukrainian losses. That might include the Georgian unit that lost 6 troops and was surrounded. It might include other things, I don't know. Russian military bloggers claimed on December the 5th and 6th that Wagner forces pushed through Ukrainian defences around Opitny and southeast of Bakhmut and are trying to establish control in the settlement. But, and this is where it gets interesting, so you got military bloggers saying one thing, and then the Wagner #1 dude, Yevgeny Prigozhin, refuted these claims on December the 6th. So no, that hasn't happened. So Russian military bloggers claim that the fighting around Vuhledar, Bakhmut, and Opitny, Klishchivka, and Kherson remained fierce on December the 6th. Yep, absolutely. And the DNR security minister noted that Russians do not have, and this is interesting, do not have the advantage of shocking unsuspecting Ukrainian forces in Bakhmut, as they had done during the siege in Mariupol in March. Khodorkovsky argued that Russian forces are making marginal advances around Bakhmut, but noted that the layout of the front line and Ukraine's months-long resistance prevents Russian forces from large-scale successes in the Bakhmut direction. And I find that, quite an interesting and telling remark. And just to finish off the Bakhmut update, here's intense shelling around Soledar. So this is from the Russians, and Soledar is looking more and more apocalyptic as the weeks go on. So that's Soledar. And then Bakhmut, there were cluster munitions used on Bakhmut last night by the Russians. Evidence of that here, but also just loads of footage of the shelling that went on overnight. This is actually claims that this was Ukrainian shelling of Wagner lines. So that might be positive for the Ukrainians, but Bakhmut it has been really intense. This bit of footage, is again pretty apocalyptic. That looks like the use of incendiary munitions. Personally, that's what I would think, but who knows? Certainly, things in Bakhmut are not nice, but really tough for both sides, as according to the sources. As we come down south towards Avdivka, Avdivka itself has been shelled by the Russians, so there's some shelling going on there. The Ukrainians have been, as they always do every day and every night, shell Donetsk, and they actually killed a member of the DNR parliament yesterday. A female member of parliament there died in the shelling. There are claims of repelled attacks from Russians and Ukrainians. It's all around here. Pervomysky as well. The Russians hit Pervomysky with shelling, and then actually some claims that around Krasnohorivka there's fighting, but also shelling all the way back here to Hostre, Vuhledar. So the Russians are appearing to be expanding their shelling to different settlements around there. Marinka is apparently again the source of a lot of activity. The Russians are using their air force to combine attacks on the Ukrainians there, but there are claims that the Ukrainian counterattacks have been repelled and Russian attacks have been repelled. So it's all looking pretty hardcore around Marinka. What do the sources have to say? Heaviest fighting is around Marinka, where Russia tries to break through. Ukrainian soldiers report the situation is hard, but say Russians are held back. Russia has reinforced. We're going on to Pavlivka in a second. And basically that's even Rybar tells very little about what's going on anywhere along the lines. It's almost like a quiet time for the forces. For the conflicts around here, but it's not, of course. It's always heavy, even if there's no territory swapping hands. Novomykhailivka is a scene of a lot of heavy shelling from the Russians. So Andrew Perpetua says there's massive shelling of the Novomykhailivka area, which is down here on my map here, and then we get on to Pavlivka and Vuhledar, and the usual sort of activities happening around there. So as we look at this area, we have Vuhledar being hit by airstrikes as well as heavy shelling. So that's coming under intense attacks. But the Ukrainians have been attacking down towards Vuhledar down here. So it's, push and shove around the area. Russians have hit Ukrainian forces, I think, in Zolotonova. I don't know in what way, whether that's sort of shelling as opposed to ground assaults. And then it appears that there have been ground assaults from the Ukrainians in the Novomykhailivka area here. So some activity going on along the Zaporizhia sort of front line here, and then into the Donetsk Oblast as well. And then we move on to Kherson, where again not a lot is happening, certainly as far as ground troops are concerned. So there is continuous shelling on both sides of the river along here. If I just zoom out a little bit, so we've got Google Earth, you are annoying. We've got Kherson being hit, as well as Berislav, which is just here, the other side of the river from Novokakhovka and the dam. You've also got, Ochakiv being shelled over here, and a number of places, Holopristan being hit. As far as the Ukrainian shelling is concerned. What do some of the sources say? Let's have a look. Russia attacked Borisov and Kherson. There are wounded. No further map changes. No activities towards the left bank reported, besides some recon around the islands. Our guess is that this area will be inactive and activity will move eastwards. I presume he means that more will be going on in the east rather than troops will be actually actively moving eastwards. Ukraine has reported shelling in Bilohorivka for several days in a row. I've marked it as contested. Again, this is this sort of lowland area, sort of river delta-ish kind of area all around here. And then going up towards there. So there is obviously, shelling taking place along here. We know that the Russians have, to some degree, moved back. This is a place we're talking about. So Bilohorivka or Dover. We know that the Russians have pulled a lot of their forces back from the immediacy of the bank here. So there's only going to be sort of skeleton activity as far as defenses are concerned here, but it'd be interesting to see what the Ukrainians do with all of that. The only other thing to mention really before I let you get on with your day is the Kerch Bridge has been partially repaired. Putin has driven across it in a Mercedes. But he did drive across the right-hand side. The left-hand side of the bridge, he says, as I understand it, is in working condition, but nevertheless it needs to be completed. It's still suffered a little. We need to bring it to an ideal state. So that is going to be interesting if Russia have the ability to use a Kerch Bridge, because then we're going to start seeing at least road traffic be able to supply Crimea, where it hasn't. They've been relying on ferries. That says nothing about whether the railway side of it has been fixed and when that will be fixed. That's been slated for, March to September next year. And that then puts so much pressure on these railway lines staying active as the only way of really supplying Crimea with meaningful capacity. But of course, that relies on really this one railway line around here. And the ability to strike at these different hubs is something that Ukraine has been exploiting. So Crimea is not easily supplied at the moment, and Ukraine know that. It's all about the logistics there. Okay, thank you very much. Hopefully that was of some use. I'm feeling pretty rotten today, so I hope I made sense. My brain is a bit muddled, as you can tell. Anyway, please like, subscribe, share. And there are lots of ways you can support my channel. One of the ways is by going to uasupporter.com/ATP, and you can grab some of the merch from there and show your support for Ukraine, whilst also giving a little bit of commission to my own channel. And welcome to new members. So I'm going to go through my members who are members of this community. Really appreciate that. Sabra Bursovic, Cindy Chimbaloo, Ricky Johnson, Vaguely Agnostic, Mitch Mazarol, Craig McLemore, John Nairich, Ionanis Kiliorus, Bo Janssen, RNH Endersby, Holly Irving, Andres Erdovics, Prey Chong, Lee Dixon, and now Cynthia Chenot. Really do appreciate all of your support. You are legends, one and all. Big love to you all. Anyway, till the pips, take care. Speak to you later.